Welcome to the Pride Month special here on the Young Turks. How's it going, everyone? I am your host, Jason Carter. So honored and glad to be joining everyone here tonight. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be joined by some of the most incredible LGBTQ plus community members, as well as allies, and some special guests that are going to be talking about the state of LGBTQ plus culture and community here in the United States, across the world, as well as other things that are trending in that area. Joining me tonight will be right now, as a matter of fact, joining me is actor and comedian. We love him. He's loved the world over. You've seen him in so many great movies, so many awesome moments on television and the big screen, as well as he is a host of the Yes Jesus podcast. Daniel Franzese is in the house. And also, of course, a familiar face, John Iadarola. John, glad to have you here as well. Good to see you.
How's it going, Jason?
It's going good, man. Glad to have everyone here tonight. Let's get into this. Happy Pride, everyone. Daniel, I want to start with you because we're going to touch on the subject of religion and the LGBTQ plus community. And earlier this spring, you were very open and very honest about an experience you had with Walsh University. They had booked you for an event and then things went left. Can you dive deep into that?
Yeah, there's this existing problem going on with the state of LGBTQ plus students in Catholic and Christian universities, and just checking on their mental health and fairness and just overall inclusion and diversity. And I was hired for the Mr. Walsh pageant at the very conservative Catholic university, Walsh University in Ohio. And this is a pageant where it's scripted. It's basically a male popularity contest, beauty pageant, sort of to like honor students who have been having an exemplary year. And the Vatican made a statement pushing back on the Pope's statement about LGBTQ people. The Pope had originally stated that no one should be kicked out or made miserable over being LGBTQ, that God loves you no matter what. And the Vatican sort of pushed back on that statement by releasing a statement delivered by the Pope that they will no longer bless same-sex unions, and that they think that LGBTQ relationships are a sin, and therefore they won't bless sin. And hours after that happened, I got fired by the university. So I had made a YouTube video sort of just like stating my case, because I was fired specifically because I was gay, because in these spaces, they don't have any safe spaces for LGBTQ kids. And seeing a person like me who's queer up there on stage, even just like hosting a pageant or just orientation or something, is a great thing for students just to be able to see an LGBTQ person in a position of celebration or power. But I guess it didn't work for them. And then I received an outpouring of letters from students, former alumni, faculty and former faculty, all who have felt that they were mistreated for being LGBTQ on that campus.
So, I mean, and Daniel, you've performed at over 50 universities that are across the nation that are faith-based Christian.
Easy.
Catholic.
Well, I don't know about all of those being faith-based, but I performed at like easily hundreds of college campuses. My show's PG-13. I know what my job is, especially when I'm on a religious campus. I have a faith-based podcast. My job is just to, show that LGBTQ people are an example of love and preach that God is love. Like just as a general person. And that has nothing to do with my comedy or my ability to literally, be like, Chris Williams is a sophomore, plays football. It's just really like reading cards. But they seem to have a problem with it. But this unearthed a lot, 15 years of students gathering and trying to have an LGBTQ safe space where they can just gather and be okay. They're not allowed to send emails or post flyers or anything that LGBTQ related. There is no place for them to go. They literally have to find each other based on just sheer, profiling and wondering if somebody might be gay or not based on how they look or how they dress. There's no way for them to gather and organize, which creates a really unsafe environment. And in a lot of these schools, there is a organization called REAP, which is holding a lot of these colleges accountable, and now has a joint lawsuit on Christian colleges together. But a lot of these spaces, they're mistreated. And if they're found out that they're gay, they could lose their credits. They could be kicked out of the university. They could be even worse, forced into conversion therapy. So this is like a very hot button topic right now that I just happen to step in. I mean, I'm a comedian. I just want to, a lot of times when a lot of this stuff happens, I just want to be funny and tell penis jokes. I don't want to. I don't even do that. I want to just keep it light and make everybody have a good time and unify everyone. But this was something where I had to I noticed that when this happened to me, that a door had opened and that had previously been closed for over almost 2 decades. And, there was not another time that I saw that door was gonna close again. So I brought all of these accusations from all of the student body and faculty and stuff to the public air again in another video. And this has led to a series of meetings that they've had at the school. They had a student government meeting. They've tried to organize. They're being shut down on every turn when looking for a place to have a club. Even as far as student government law goes, they're supposed to get an answer within 10 days, and it's been well over 2 months. And there's still no resolution for these students who now have been meeting at a gazebo on campus, which is, you don't have to reserve. It's just something that's on campus. So they've turned it into the gazebo. And whenever there's like a student, they're on the other side of campus on a little tiny gazebo, handing out flyers and trying to reach each other. But it looks like they're going to try to wait out this this school year, and hopefully hope the troublemakers will graduate or whatever. And that's just what it seems like. And they're not going to really address it until next year. But on my show, Yash Jesus, we're going to hold them accountable and keep checking in.
Well, you definitely held them accountable in your video on YouTube, which I watched multiple times, and you were so visceral and so honest about how you felt about that, and I agree with you when you say that that some of these institutions are abusing their tax-exempt status and the Religious Freedoms Act to enact discrimination. As you said, it's a ripple effect, and it's sad because here we are in 2021, right, where we hope that you see a lot. You see a lot of places, especially like in Los Angeles and religious places that are saying all is welcome, all are welcome. And we thought that we were turning the page and turning the tide when it comes to that, but also living in a bubble of like Los Angeles or here in Miami and other areas that aren't so progressive. The discrimination is probably more prevalent now than ever. And you bring up the Vatican rescinding and pretty much rolling back what he said about supporting gay marriage and supporting same-sex marriage, because on March 15th, the Roman Catholic Church said they cannot bless same-sex marriages. Sorry, but however, back in 2013, the Pope was quoted saying about members of the LGBT community, quote, "If they accept the Lord and have goodwill, who am I to judge them? They shouldn't be marginalized." And then in the 2020 documentary Francesco, he also called for the creation of civil union laws for same-sex relationships, and he's quoted saying that homosexuals have a right to be a part of the family.
Well, in his Angelus address that following Sunday after the Vatican's announcement, the Pope himself had sort of retracted a little bit and had gone back and said that we need to care with these kind of things in the way of Christ, with care and compassion. And I think that is what we were holding Walsh accountable to, is sort of just saying you have to. What's interesting about Walsh University and a lot of these other universities is they're the people who are graduating there are graduating with degrees in education and mental health. In all kinds of nursing, and so teachers. So you just want to make sure that those people know at least how to coexist with LGBTQ people. This goes back again to the Religious Freedom Protection Act, where people sort of can not bake us a cake for our weddings or what have you. But this is beyond a cake, kind of a situation. Transparency is key for an LGBTQ person's safety and clarity and mental health. So, if they say gay people, LGBTQ lifestyle is not permitted on campus on their website, that's fine with us. We won't go. But instead, they sort of lure students in by, putting what maybe a profiling picture of two lesbians sitting in a field, or, have some rainbow writing and just certain things that go, oh, maybe they are affirming. They're just not very clear on it. They'll show kids with piercings that look alternative, and they say, well, they don't seem so conservative. And then when you look at their mandate on their website, they talk about how they're all about compassion and diversity and inclusion, and they just don't say sexuality and keep it quiet. That's the problem, is that it's not transparent. And when you make plans to go to like a $41,000 a year university with your parents and everything else, and you don't want to come out to them maybe, and you've got to deal with all this. There's a lot of pressure. It could be damaging. There's a high suicide rate for students that are in pressurized environments like this to begin with, and then when you can add on top of it that they have to hide who they are and have absolutely no way to find an ally. When my co-host of Yash Jesus, Azariah Southworth, did the Freedom Ride, which was a bike ride to all the Christian colleges sort of to try to just let the students on each campus know that there's people that love them and that God loves them. They had to literally, in some instances, stand across the street from the schools holding signs with their phone numbers because they weren't even permitted to like walk onto the grounds or be.
Which is so, which is so, which reminds me of discrimination of people of color, 50, 60 years ago. It's that in real time. And I love how you sort of articulately illustrated that when to lure, you said to lure people in. It's much like,
they want our pink money, they want our creativity, they want the caring teachers, and they want all of the things that queer people provide. But at the end of the day, they don't want to be accepting, and they allude to the fact of that. My whole thing is just be out front on your website, on the front of your door, say no queers allowed, and we won't buy a damn cake from you.
Right. John, I know John Iadarola, you're there. Care to chime in?
Yeah, actually, I had a question. So look, I know that you know the nature of your podcast and a lot of the schools that you've been to, like you're steeped in Christianity and like the current state of Christianity. Admittedly, I'm not a Christian. I live in godless LA. So what I'm curious about is, in your video, you talk about obviously the proximity between you losing the job and the statement from the Vatican, and both of you just went through the really interesting back and forth of like a little bit of tolerance, and then they take it back, and the Pope's infallible, but apparently he messed up when it came to that. So, but what I'm curious is, like, as an outsider, those are the sorts of statements I look to try to understand some version of where Christianity stands on the LGBTQ community. But I'm curious, when you're interacting with people, either the audience of your podcast, you're going to the university, how strong and direct is the relationship between official pronouncements of either the Vatican or the Pope or any particular cardinal or anything like that?
Look,
and
at the end of the day, I put my nephew to sleep every night singing the song like, this faith of mine, the world didn't give it to me. The world doesn't supply this kind of thing that I need. I don't need it from the Vatican. I don't need it I get it from God. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, we hold so many things dear to us, whether it's our favorite pop star or a Louis Vuitton bag, and we'd never let anybody like take our Louis Vuitton bag, and just give it away. But as soon as we declare that we're gay, we allow people to take our God away. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that should be so much more precious to us. And if you did grow up with God, and it is God is something that has done works in your life that made you feel great, why should you be forced to make a choice between the two because a human told you to?
Yeah. And so, sort of what
go John.
Yeah. So sort of what I'm wondering is, like, let's say the Vatican keeps messing up, doesn't evolve, doesn't really change on this. Like, for a lot of like either younger Christians or members of the LGBTQ community who are Christians, does that really matter? Like, is it changing a lot regardless of that here in America?
It does for the queer people. I mean, we want our allies and we want our family members to say, hey, we're not gay, but we're not gonna give our money every Sunday to a church that doesn't support my cousin or my brother or my family or whoever.
Yeah.
A lot of these churches, especially these young Christian progressive churches, they love to come up with names that make them sound like gyms. They sound like Energize or like Fierce Church or whatever. They come up with these like kind of names that make them sound like hip and cool and young, but they're all governed by bigger organizations that don't welcome LGBTQ people into their spaces. So they might have like a gay couple in the front of the pews holding hands, but at the end of the day, gay people can't rise to leadership within that church. Their children can't go to their schools, but they'll take their money and they'll say, hey, you guys, and give them a hug on their anniversary, but they won't marry them, they won't baptize them. It's like, so I think, there's a good website called churchclarity.org that we always recommend to people to just see which churches are exactly queer affirming. And I think it's gonna take a pregnant mom who's gay affirming to say, I'm gonna raise if my kid's gay, I'll love them anyway. And are you gonna raise your kid in the church? Yeah, I'm gonna raise my kid in the church. Well, what if your kid at 13, 14, 16 tells you they're gay and the church doesn't accept them? Well, I'll take them out of that church. Well, then don't have them in a church that's not gay affirming when they're young. Like, we need to be in a place where a gay person could be a Sunday school teacher or could be an elder or a treasurer or a janitor. Yeah. If they're not allowed to work for the institution, then I don't really want to worship there.
Right. Right. Just in conclusion to what the Vatican had said about same-sex marriage, in an interview with NPR, when asked if the church does have the power to give the blessing of unions of persons of same sex, the answer was a negative. And also, the church says the Vatican does not and cannot bless sin. Back to what you're saying, Danny, about the making church seem cool, and then them having as kind of like this guise of like coolness of having an LGBTQ plus couple in the front. It's very indicative of just taking this outside of religion, just how for marginalized groups of people, when people who don't support marginalized groups of people want to gather and reap the benefits of showing that they are allies and their performative allyship, they get you in the door. But then when you're inside the house, they mistreat you. And I think it's like working for a company that's all about inclusion. Sure, they hire the black guy, but then when the black guy's hired, what do they do with him? They sideline him or have him not even engaged in what he's there to do. So we got to be very vigilant with that. Want to talk about the youth and LGBTQ plus, because you mentioned that kids at Walsh University are young. We have Gen Z millennials that are very impressionable, and they have access to so many. There's kids nowadays have access to so much more than the generation before, as far as with social media and the internet. And I want to talk about identification in regards to how
these students are so smart and they are so exciting. This generation excites me every day. One of the students was telling me how when she was trying to find out if Walsh was affirming or not, how she kept searching things like LGBTQ and Walsh, and I was like, well, that Google hit certainly hits different now. But like she was searching things, to try to find out, and she found an essay written by a student in a class that was opposing an idea that was sort of like they were saying something that was LGBTQ positive, and that gave her hope. So it just really doesn't even matter. It's real, it could be an essay that helped this girl get through a couple of years where she felt really alone at the school. She knew that she was able to connect through this essay this guy wrote to find out about a secret little society they were having, like getting together and watching movies. And so it doesn't matter who you are if you just shine a little bit of your light, and just let people know a little bit about who you are. Someone could find that. Right. And these students are way more savvy than that. They're mobilizing. One girl told me, she's like, I have 2 more years here at Walsh, and if we don't have an LGBTQ club by then, I'm going to stay here and get my master's. She's like, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to stay at this school and make it my mission. And they have that kind of a heart. It's going to take that kind of a heart to break down these barriers. It's going to take the heart of allies to say, you know what, we're not going to donate our money here, even though if it is my alma mater, if you're not going to allow everyone and really preach that God is love.
Right, and I would agree with you that this younger generation, there is. I don't want to say that they're stubborn or entitled, but there's a little bit of entitlement that's good, right? They feel. I think the older generations, we were told about to. And I hate to say older generations like I'm some boomer, right? But I'm not. But about respect though, I don't think we were as loud, or we felt that we were entitled to be as loud as these new kids, because growing up, all we saw on television was any kind of view of LGBTQ plus. Anything on TV was either hyper stereotypical, really effeminate men, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that was a stereotype, or people dying of AIDS. Or you had people of the trans experience being murdered in the street, which is still happening now. But there was nothing that was, as you said, affirming in a positive way. But now more than ever, we are seeing with shows like Pose and so many avenues and so many different ways for us to be exposed to the beauty and the strength of the LGBTQ plus community, that these younger generations are way more emboldened and feel like, yes, I'm gonna flip every table, bust down every door. Who's with me? They galvanized.
They created a T-shirt. They chalked loving messages all over the school. They started a change.org. 200 people showed up to the student government meeting, which is usually 50. I actually was able to watch with a closed camera on the student government meeting, and I remember the president of the Black Student Union saying, we've had similar problems in the past here of feeling discriminated against, and we offer our place to you. We don't even have to be there. He was like, you can be here and tell your stories. You can feel safe. You can come with us. We'll change our name to the Minority Students Union if that's how you feel and you don't feel welcome here because we love you. And it's students like that, and it's people like that who are it's gonna take to step forward to sort of just like, crack this open. Because right now these private universities have a little gate, and there's like these little fantasy worlds that go on behind those gates where they could control their students and say whatever they want. I mean, they even told their students that if they got sick with COVID, that they would have to go home and they would lose their tuition. They would still have to pay for housing. Wow. Like, this is a school that has control to do whatever they want when you're privately owned. You can do whatever you want. So we need to make sure that these students are safe. Imagine a situation where an LGBTQ couple was maybe like in a domestic violence situation, and the victim of the relationship wouldn't be able to speak out to anyone because for fear of losing all of their credits. Right. And so they would be living in maybe like a potentially dangerous situation. That's just one example of why there needs to be a safe space that these kids can even go to. Even in the student government meeting, there were people chiming in and yelling expletives and stuff on there. And it just goes to show that they can't even have a student government meeting where they could just be themselves.
Well, and in a place where there are mature adults that besides these young adults that could govern this and make sure that the safety of whoever's there should be protected, because at the end of the day, that's what they should be doing. On a positive note, though, because we've been talking about some things that are less than favorable when it comes to religion and private institutions. The U.S. Lutheran Church has elected their first openly transgender bishop, Reverend Megan Rohr. They were elected as bishop to the Sierra Pacific Synod, which is based in Sacramento and includes 200 congregations in California and Nevada. And she says, quote, "I am so proud to be a Lutheran. And I pray that my election by the faithful people of the Sierra Pacific Synod will become a constant reminder that God's fabulous love is never limited by the opinions of legislation or others." That's incredible. Wow. That's incredible. And the conversation, this is something we could talk about for a long time, because I think people have very staunch and very concrete views on religion and LGBTQ+, but it is safe to say that there are people who, like yourself, Danny, I'm sure lots of people watching right now that do have faith that are not LGBTQ+, but realize that, hey, we deserve love and all the same privileges and rights, if you will, as cisgender and non-LGBTQ+ people do.
Yeah, so, I'm not a preacher or a teacher. I'm a comedian and a sinner and just a wanderer like everyone else. And that's what we say in the show. We don't Bible study. Nobody knows the answers. If you do, tell us. We're all looking for it. Like, I feel like some of the churches and some of the organizations are reading the Bible and feeding it to you, when it should be something you go and explore yourself.
Right, and I've been to so many churches where it sounds like one big long script that's been rehearsed for weeks. It's like, and then just one time I went to a sermon and the guy messed up. He's like, "Wait, let me take that back. Let me start again." And it was just like, "All right, man."
They do need to take it back a little bit. Just one little note, because I know we're running out of time. But like, if you think of Joseph and his amazing Technicolor dream coat, right? Joseph's coat. The original translation from 46 AD was Ketenet Pasim, which only appears one other place in the Bible, and that's for a virginal princess dress. They keep teaching us it's a coat, it's a coat, it's a coat, and everyone was jealous of it. But when you read it this way, and from the original translation, you realize it was a dress, and Joseph was genderqueer, and if anything, maybe even a trans woman of color. These are perspectives that LGBTQ people need to see.
Yeah. John, any last words?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that there's some stuff that we weren't able to get to that was positive news. The study that you had broken out some elements of about LGBTQ youth finding so much more acceptance online than a lot of them, unfortunately, still like in their local areas are able to find. And for someone like me, who I see the often corrosive negative effects of certain groups organizing more online. Obviously there's a lot of like white supremacist, neo-Nazi, QAnon, all of that. You see it, and you see the effects on politics, you see the effects on social media and on YouTube and stuff like that. Like, seeing it have a positive effect is really like reaffirming. Like, I've seen so much bad, negative organizing, negative both societally, but also seemingly breaking down the individuals and turning them into, shells of their former selves. Seeing it actually helping people who are experiencing like a complete or near complete lack of empathy in their own lives, whether it's at their universities, whether it's coming from their student governments, whether it's coming unfortunately from their families or even from some of their churches. Seeing them able to find something to hold them over online is very positive.
Yeah, it is. The internet doesn't always have to be a scary place, and I think that the more time we have, the more safe spaces for these people that they can discover, the better. They're giving me the 1 minute wrap. Danny, where can they listen to your Yash Jesus podcast, and where can they discover and love you and experience you on the internet?
Come wander with us at yasjesuspod.com. And you can find me anywhere on the internet at What's Up, Danny. That's what's up.
Welcome back to our Pride Month special here on the Young Turks. I'm your host, Jason Carter, and I'm happy to be joined by John Iadarola, of course, familiar face on the Young Turks. I want to welcome to the panel Odessa Kelly, and she is running for Congress in Tennessee's 5th District. Odessa is a lesbian who calls for the passing of the Equality Act and denounces anti-LGBTQ discrimination. She wants to ensure that the voices of LGBTQ Americans are represented in every policy conversation. Odessa, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Hey, Jason, I'm glad to be here. What's going on, guys?
What's going on? Let's get into this. What inspired you to run for Congress? That's people don't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I want to run for Congress."
Absolutely, it's not the way that I woke up. I feel like I didn't have a choice. And as an organizer in the past 6 or 7 years, we have protested, we have marched, we have organized, we've advocated, we've done everything that we possibly can to help the 99% of this country, the working class, the working poor, to move the needle an inch, but it's not enough. In this past year, the pandemic, there were so many opportunities at the congressional level, but not just to help us here in Nashville, but across the country. People are feeling the same urgencies and desperation and not being met. And the reasons why we're missing the mark is because people are not listening to people, and that takes a special quality. And as an organizer, I have those special skills. So I couldn't sleep at night without running.
There you go. So what are the issues that you are running for, and what do you want to see change when you do get in office?
Well, yeah, as it being Pride Month, as an openly gay Black woman, LGBTQ is, it's not just sexual classification, but it's your identity, and it's also intersectional. As the LGBTQ nation, we are tired, we flawed, we're the working class, we're the working poor, we're the ones that are catching as much as housing injustice as anyone else. We care about the earth. So I'm pushing for the Green New Deal. The reason why I love the Green New Deal is because as a Black woman, and a person who's struggling, always working check to check, I have never had a chance to really chime in, but I care about the earth just as much as the next person does. So it gives the opportunity to take care of the earth, and it builds pathway out of poverty of so many groups. Another thing that I'm running for is housing justice. I'm running for healthcare. I think healthcare is something that we care about a lot in the LGBTQ community. Sure. It's something I thought about as a Metro employee. I worked for the city of Nashville for 14 years. And 8 years in 2014, 2015 is when they started having domestic partnerships. And that's really when we start thinking about how you have to carry, me and my partner at the time, 2 health insurances and all these different things, and that's a cost as well. I'm already just on the city salary. So, those type of things are what's important to me.
When things are hitting home, especially in the 5th District, what are some of the issues that are facing the 5th District and where you want to represent?
A lot of issues. The state of Tennessee has been horrible. It's been very discriminatory against LGBTQ people. One of the things that happened here in the state of Tennessee this year is that they decided that LGBTQ history or issues cannot be taught in the public school system. Mm-hmm. And frankly, did the same thing for Black people. They say you can't teach critical race theory here either. So when I win this race and I make history, they won't be able to teach about me in the history books. So it's really just trying to retard some of the issues and legislation that's coming down from our state level.
Oh, Jason, on a personal level, though, I'm sure there's people watching right now that are interested in hearing about your coming out story. I think I always find it so inspiring as well when you hear, because we all come from different walks of life, different experiences, and some people have coming out stories that aren't as I would say bad as the next, but for yourself, what was your coming out story like for you?
Yeah, my coming out story, I guess, was funny or comical. I think it happened in 2 different ways. My first coming out, I think I was in 4th grade, and I was in school with a bunch of friends. And I told this girl she had to be my girlfriend. She put her hand on my shoulder, like, "Odessa, you gay? You can't be gay," or whatever. And I was like, "But you got to be my girlfriend." So at the lunch table, we had this huge argument, and everyone was included in it about whether this girl should be my girlfriend or not. It's 50-50, And then again, 16 and a half, I told my parents, I was like, hey, I like girls. And they were like, we've been doing that. We're just waiting on you to say something. It's pretty much it.
That's so. I mean, that's so funny. Similar with me, my mom. She was like, "Okay, are we gonna have lunch now?" I mean, this is not breaking news. We're just waiting for you to have a news flash and for you to get it together. But with that said, though, I've talked. John Iadarola is here as well. Me and him have both talked about LGBTQ plus issues and about me being black in the LGBTQ plus and just the juxtaposition of non POC and POC LGBTQ plus issues. And for us, Odessa, or for yourself, what do you find difficult about being gay and black? Do you think it's more within our community, or do you think it's outside of our community, or is it a mixture of both? I think it's very hard to be gay and black in the black community, and now more than ever, I've experienced homophobia in a time where on social media, online, in conversation, we're all trying to assemble like the Avengers and fight Thanos, this horrible evil of people that are trying to take down marginalized groups of people, be it in our own backyards, our own homes, in our own communities, which that is the black community. We're treated even worse. Has that been the same for you?
No, I do recognize it for black men. For gay black men, for trans men, especially in the transgender community, it's horrific, amongst black people and how they're treated. But I would say the biggest issue that I've had is, I will say, fighting for the working class. There's still like this. Anti-blackness runs in everything, when you start to talk about that, and when it intersects into like what are good business practices, sometimes that can also intersect into like LGBTQ issues, when we start thinking about it that way. I think that's been one of the hardest areas for me to break into, is literally just fighting for equality, because as you know, as a LGBTQ man, you're not just that. You're so many other things, like all the other justices, they affect you as well. So when we start talking about raising wages, when we start talking about putting regulations on corporations who have these oppressive laws that are coming down on working class people, on working poor people, I think it gets really hard, because sometimes it's like, if I have to ever take off my, black hat to put on my LGBTQ hat, then there's an injustice within that as well, right? And it's the same thing with my advocacy hat, like advocating for what's right is just advocating for what's right. So.
Regardless of gay, black, white, straight, yeah, John, we're having the blackest conversation with John Iadarola.
I'm just glad to be a part.
What's up, John?
Hardly the time for me to try to make this about myself, so I'm not going to do it. So, but you're talking about Thanos, and there's these looming threats and everything. Like politically, recently it seems like the Republican Party, it's always an open question. Who are they going to make their existence about hating? And lately, it seems to be they've decided over the past year, BLM, anyone advocating for racial justice is openly an enemy. You hear Marjorie Greene just say BLM terrorists constantly. And over the past few months especially, anti-trans legislation is everywhere. It's like 80% of what the Republican Party is doing when they're not trying to stop generally black people from voting. So, and by the way, Tennessee has had multiple, Odessa, you mentioned the curriculum bill. They've also got the requiring businesses to post this misgendering information, forcing, there's things about obviously student athletes. Tennessee is like almost ground zero for these issues. What do you think about that, about this new phase of the culture wars, really demonizing the transgender community, and in particular, younger transgender individuals?
I mean, it's frustrating, especially as a person who literally works with LGBTQ youth all the time. Some of these are just plots and ploys that are ginned up by the Republican Party, just to like keep us distracted from what the real issues are. And the real issues are the ones that I just talked about. If I sit down and I talk to my friends who also identify, as LGBTQ member or LGBTQ, we're talking about, being able to pay our rent, and also be able to pay all of our bills, and where are we gonna be able to live, because gentrification is a real thing, not just in Nashville, but every urban metropolitan city across this country. So those are the things that we are talking about. So when they gin up these things like that, it's just an extra barrier, which is more motivation to run, and to make sure that, we have representation that is fighting back and not just giving into that.
Right. Well, John, you entered politics into the conversation. Let's talk about that, because we want to move into the Biden administration and how they're doing as far as the LGBTQ plus community so far in 2021 since he's entered office. And I mean, the question is, how has the Biden administration been doing? Is it enough? GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, released a poll of 800 LGBTQ adults of their thoughts on Biden's overall job performance since being in office, and 78% say Biden is doing an excellent or good job as president. And they go on to say that LGBTQ plus adults expressed concern when the US Senate's ability to pass pro-equality legislation came to pass. 70% reported being very or somewhat concerned that the filibuster could block legislation like voting rights, immigration reform, gun safety, and LGBTQ equality measures. 47% of LGBTQ plus Americans say the Senate should end the filibuster. And this is all according to GLAAD. So the question is, point blank period, is the Biden-Harris administration doing enough for LGBTQ plus? Is it too soon to say, only 6 months in, 7 months into his administration?
It's setting a good precedent, I'll say that. They first of all, they overturned a lot of the restrictive laws that were put in place by the Trump administration.
Sure.
So that's one critical piece that they've already started. Making sure that they have representation within their cabinet and some of the higher offices. It's like setting a precedent for where we can go. There's so many more possibilities and things that could be done as well. But yeah, it's a good start. I will say, just 100 days in, it's a little early, but I think they made a good effort in getting, a precedent of an expectation, to like normalize again, what it means to actually fight for equality, not to have it, but to actually fight for it, and what it looks like to be intentional about and be inclusivity, and how it should show up in everywhere, not just in representation of an individual, but how does it show up in policies as well, right? How does it show up in how we govern and interact with each other? So it's a good precedent that they're setting.
Well, you mentioned that he appointed a record number of LGBTQ plus officials to administration. That's great to have people inside the House that can make change. But some people feel that the Biden administration isn't doing enough for anti-trans violence. Last year surpassed, of course, in 2019, 44 trans people were reported killed, according to the Human Rights Campaign. So far in 2021, at least 17 people of the trans experience have been killed, with more than half of them being Black trans women. And there's been 9 anti-LGBTQ plus bills that have been signed into law in 2021, putting the year on track to become the worst year for state legislative attacks against LGBTQ plus people in history. So, I mean, the thing that, yeah, it's hard to ask. I mean, you said the president has gone off to a great start, right? But it's hard to ask someone to fix 4 years of complete dreck in just 100 days, or even in a year. It's gonna take more than that. But at least he is aware and openly speaking about it, and that says a lot about, I think, Biden, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that, but I mean, that's also correct, right? You can't skip that number. The 17 people have already died, and I think that goes back to, I put my advocating and my organizing hat on. I would tell everyone out there, do not stop doing what you're doing at the grassroots level, and to keep the pressure, on the Biden administration. Don't let the pressure off them. So far, we have to keep pushing until we get to a place where we're all safe and comfortable.
7 states, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, West Virginia, South Dakota, and Idaho have banned trans athletes from competing on school sports teams that align with their gender identity. That's that conversation. I've had that conversation openly with people, and it's a very hot one. How do you feel? Keeping it 100.
It is ridiculous. Again, I don't know where this issue has even come up anyway for it to be, legislated on in the first place. And second of all, why put more barriers and create more harm? Even if we look past just an identity issue, it's hard enough for young people, teens, who are trying to find themselves, and to put one more piece of legislation in place that creates another barrier or a hurdle for them to jump, is just creating more harm, and it's just hateful. That's all it is. It is 100% hateful. You know, I don't know. I don't think anyone has really the words to explain it. You know, all I can say again, same thing I just said. You know, we have to keep advocating and fighting at the grassroots level to not accept this whatsoever. You know.
Yeah, Odessa. So I couldn't agree more. Obviously, that there has to be that in terms of both, you know, helping people who are struggling with an unimaginably difficult circumstance that's becoming marginally more difficult with the efforts of these Republican state legislatures, that's totally necessary. But it also feels like you have all these different states that have decided, okay, we got to get our base fired up. We don't really want to talk about Biden's agenda because, you know, like we don't want to support more infrastructure or aid for families, but we don't want to say that we don't want to do that. So we're going to make it all about trans youth. We're going to demonize them. And so they're doing that. They're doing that in Texas and Tennessee and in Florida. Literally this morning, the first day of Pride, Ron DeSantis signs one of the sorts of bills that we're talking about here. And like, I guess the Democrats quietly are a little bit better on the issue, but they're not saying anything about it. They're not trying to pass any bills to protect this community. Biden's not making big speeches. Like, it feels like it's just silent surrender and retreat as more and more states like predatorially like attack this group. And it feels like, okay, yeah, you know, if you were to really ask some of these Democrats what they think, maybe they'd answer right, but they're not really doing anything with their positions, even in states where they control the legislature. They have the White House, they have the Senate, they have the House. I feel like they could be at least trying to do more to show the community that they have their backs and not just silently, not just sort of in the shadows.
Yeah, I agree. I think that again, it goes back to what you said. You know, there are a lot of issues out here, a lot of things that are going on, and I think it is shows like this bringing attention to it, you know, and giving voice to where we see there being an urgency and need for there to create legislation and protective laws, you know, but it also can't just happen there too. It's got to happen at the local level. It's got to happen on the state level. It's got to happen at the grassroots and the organizing and the advocacy level as well, you know, to make sure that we keep the pressure on them to change some of these things, you know, to every LGBTQ youth out there. You know, I got your back, and there's so many other people out here that got your back on this. So do not fret over this thing, because you got people who are going to be fighting for you day in and day out. You know, even if you can't see the change now, the change is coming.
It's coming. It's coming. It blows my mind that these are young young people. They're not, you know, they're not. I mean, I guess they're young adults, but in the grand scheme of things, in their life cycle, these are young teens. You know, they're kids that are, as John, as you mentioned, are going through something that not everyday people go through, and it's painful. Being ostracized from family members, being ostracized from the community, trying to reconcile who you are, in addition to fighting for their life, and then having people that they don't know also villainize them, has to be a lot. And Odessa, I couldn't agree with you more that there are people there that are willing. As I said, using my John, I hate to bring in Marvel Comics again. I've been on a Marvel Comics thing all week, but we're assembling like the Avengers to fight Thanos, and Thanos is what we just talked about, these evils that are plaguing marginalized groups of people. But it's on a positive note. Let's have a little levity here. It is Pride Month. How are you going to be celebrating this year?
Like I always celebrate Pride Month, you know, I go get on my rainbow unicorn and I ride around the universe, slaying injustice wherever I can find it. Yeah, I just like every other day, but this is a fun month, you know. We pushed our Pride celebration back to September, just, you know, to ensure everyone is safe, given that we just came out of a pandemic. But yeah, you know, my clothes are already bright and wonderful, but you know. Oh no.
You're like Pride Day, Pride Month is every month, 365 days a year, 24/7. I feel you on that. John, any last words?
You know, at the risk of possibly making this just slightly negative for just a second, I just want to focus on Odessa's campaign, because obviously, you know, as we spoke about when you were on my show, like you're going up against a Democrat who, you know, he likes to say in this area of issues that he has the right positions. But we've talked a lot about leadership. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about like that gap potentially? Like, obviously you're running against him. You feel like it's not quite there. Tell me a little bit about him in that role versus you potentially taking over.
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to who is actually tuned in and is an accurate representation what we have here in Nashville, you know, as a city and who we are, but also too across this country. You know, I have spent 6 years, you know, being blessed enough to travel across this country and listen to people and hear what their issues are. The same thing here in Nashville. You know, if you look at my record in Nashville, look at what we've done in 2 years. You know, we've brought housing back to the urban core in this city. You know, we've put worker issues and racial issues at the forefront of how we create and make policy. You know, and if you can see that, that's exactly what's missing at the congressional level. And I think it's going to take a person who can actually have the shared perspective of everyday people. I feel what you're going through. I know what it's like to wake up and have to decide which bill you're gonna pay. You know, I know how it is to have the cops behind you, knowing that you ain't done anything wrong. You know, and I know what it feels like to be in love with the person and not know whether you're gonna be able to like marry that person in the state that you represent, that you come from. You know, so all these things intersect. And when I say we talk about leadership, it's going to take a person who can understand all those things to make sure that we can have it trickle down and people actually feel the effect of it who need it the most.
Yeah, great. Well, they're giving me the 5 minute mark. Odessa, you have been incredible. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you here on the Young Turks. Wishing you all the best in your campaign. I'm gonna follow you on Instagram so I can see the campaign party on Instagram, because I know you're gonna get in office. It's gonna be a wonderful thing.
Please do, and thank you for having me on, to both of you.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're gonna take a break. More from our TYT Pride Month special when we come back. Stick around.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.